We've got two gentlemen on stage representing a couple of businesses. I'd like to do a quick introduction for you both. If you could both introduce yourselves and where you're from, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm Edward Scott from CropScan Ag. So we've got the near-infrared grain analyzer here, which fits onto the combine. So yeah, I'm involved in a lot more of the data side of it, which we'll deep dive into through this on how we can really get value out of some of that information coming through.
And yeah, Jim Castles here with Metos ANZ. Predominantly a weather station, but sort of other monitoring sensors and associated sort of software behind the scenes on making decisions based off those sensors and weather.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so there's a couple of different sort of pieces of tech that fit on farm here, but I can probably see some linkages too. But so I guess the question is, what sort of solutions or what sort of questions are farmers coming to you with, and how do your respective, I guess, Agtech devices sort of fit into that? What are they looking for? What do they want to know?
Yeah, sure. So I guess even when we think about tech and where it's come from and where it's going to, so I guess putting in the context of ourselves with CropScan Ag, what started out as a near-infrared sensor for originally blending grain, so blending high protein with low protein grain, is now becoming a key precision ag tool for managing nitrogen in crop. So we look at grain protein, and protein is a great indicator of how available nitrogen has been to the crop relative to the available moisture. So soil moisture will drive yield, rainfall will drive yield, and then your nitrogen or nutrients in general, but nitrogen is your lead nutrient for driving that protein in crop. So once you start looking at your protein alongside your yield, it actually starts being a really good fertiliser performance map, right?
Yep.
So out of that, the growers who have sort of come on that journey, which has really got traction over the last sort of 5 years. So the tech's been around for around 10 years, but the last 5 years we've really gone on that journey of trying to help farmers actually utilise the data and make sense of it to make more informed decisions for improved productivity and product profitability. So with that, what are the growers asking us? They're like, well, we've heard some stories about protein being a bit of an indicator of how growers are going on the journey for making variable rate prescriptions off it. How does that work? So traditionally, growers have been thinking, building protein, that's just a late application of nitrogen. But what we're seeing is the earlier we're going, we're actually getting a yield increase. So yield and protein is tied together with a nitrogen response curve. So if we get an increase in protein, we'll be getting an increase in yield too. And we're seeing a yield increase of 300 to 600 kilos from East Coast to West Coast. So that's the sort of discussion that's starting to be unpacked there around how can we start linking some of this data that we're getting across the field into variable rate decision making.
Okay, excellent, awesome. Jim, what about from your perspective?
Boiling it down to the simple weather, growers want more accurate weather. You know, the bomb network in Australia is great, but it's fairly sparse. And so farmers sort of go, well, I want more localised, accurate weather at my farm. And then even farmers, you know, on the north side of my farm to the south side of the farm. So how do I do that? How do I get the information? You know, how does it work? How does it connect? Then what do I need to hang off that station? You know, everywhere from, you know, a rain gauge, soil probes and everything in between, is that question of then, you know, now I've got this station, now I can see where I've got the rain, it's, well, now what? And so it's that they've got the hardware, but what's that next step? Like Ed mentioned, that next step of, I've got the hardware, I'm getting a beautiful protein map, but what can I then do with that data? So it's sort of, we're reaching a stage now, you know, the weather stations, they're in the field, they've been collecting data, but okay, now what do I do with it? What decisions can I make from that? Or what can I add to it further through APIs, through unlock codes to get more out of it?
And do you find farmers are coming to you with a really clear goal about what they want to do with that data, or it's an exploring process first around, you know, what can I do with this tech and what
it would be
I follow
50-50.
with?
You've got the farmers that are, you know, a little bit more in front of that bell curve that have now had the tech and had the data and going, okay, I want to take it further and, you know, ROI a little bit, but more so, you know, what can I do with this data to make my life easier? And then you still get the farmers sort of going, you know, they walk up to you at the field day here and sort of go, well, what's this? And you say, it's a weather station. Oh, what does that do? It tells you weather. And so there is still the full spectrum of users out there. But you're sort of the 2-3 year old weather station customers now are sort of going, okay, yep, it tells me rain, it tells me temperature. What can I do with it? What decisions can I make behind that? And linking it to a protein map, like you can look at your weather map from the growing season and go, oh, this year was really hot and dry and my protein was high or low. 2 years ago, there was a really cold, wet winter and my protein, oh, look, there's some similarities or there's some consistencies. Instead of, so making those decisions through the growing season rather than a protein map at the end of the year, okay, what can I do to change? Well, I can start to make informed decisions throughout the year.
Yeah, and I think that's trying to work out what is the limitations of some of the tech and trying to think about how can we best utilise in situ tech, so stuff that's sitting there for a long time, tracking trends versus point in time, maybe more dynamic spatial data. So we're obviously capturing this data at the end of the season, which is a reflection of something's happened over the season. Yep. But if we don't ever take the time to go back and say, well, what was the conditions that led to that outcome, we cannot make those improved decisions for that following season. And the best thing for the guys who are now sort of in that 3 to 5 year journey, like we're seeing now, it's like, oh, this year's shaping up like 2018. And you're like, let's go back to that 2018 data. What should we be expecting? And how can we put steps in place to either even out the variability beforehand or know what to expect, so we know how to either best manage harvest and the logistics around it and the other layers going forward. So trying to work out, again, what are those limitations of, what is the tech designed to do? And then how do you best extrapolate that out if you've got capacity to link that in with other tech?
Yeah. There's lots of discussion I'm hearing around understanding the decisions that you're going to make. How do you lead that discussion, or how should farmers approach the actual core tech that they might need to get? Like, we're talking about the endpoint, but how do you work through the process of, okay, well, what components of a weather station are relevant, or what components and what measurements do you need to be actually measuring in the grain? Like, there's probably a process there, I'm assuming, that is really critical to get right, so that they've got the right data to feed those decisions. How do you manage that with farmers?
Yeah, no, it's definitely having the conversation, right? Like you say, where are you now? What tech have you got? And we find a lot of guys when they're talking about, say, a variable rate journey, they might be on their second variable rate seeder or spreader and haven't done a map, right? Like never put anything variably through that machine. So you say, well, okay, there's an opportunity that's sitting there. And then others, they're like, I want to go on this journey towards variable rate. I don't have a variable rate spreader. How do I get there? Well, let's have a look at your variability. Let's understand your data and say you might have, for us, like 3 to 5% variability in protein, really common. So we can see that's probably best part of a ton of yield variability across a field quite easily. So that becomes the low-hanging fruit. And then you say, okay, well, if we're on a 3-year journey to your next upgrade of your spreader, how can we start putting those data pieces of the puzzle together so when you do invest, you're ready to go?
Yeah. What about you, Jim?
Similarly with the weather stations, just having that conversation with the grower about what they think they need, because I think Steve Jobs sort of said, people don't know what they don't know. So having that conversation, with, I guess, industry expertise or knowledge, saying to them, have you thought about this, or leading them down that journey a little bit, but also having a look at their setup. If it's a 200-acre farm in one location, they'll get away with one weather station. But if they've got a farm here and one 60 k's down the road, probably main weather station here and just a rain gauge or a temperature, wind sensor. We've got a vineyard that put a full weather station on their secondary block, and you have a conversation with them like, do you use that data? And they go, oh, the wind sensor. And you go, well, what do you mean? And they, I use the wind sensor. If it's not windy, I send the sprayers down there. So he didn't need a full weather station. Yeah. Why'd you buy a full weather station? My agronomist said it's what I should buy. You don't need to spend that much money. So sort of trying to find the solution. Long term, he'll probably add stuff to it, but also having that conversation, where do you want to be now? Where do you want to be in the future? Do you need a soil moisture probe? Well, no. Budget comes into it. Like, it's a reality. This stuff is expensive. Do you want to buy it now? Or, well, let's buy a base model now, or a base plate now, and then have the capability to grow into other sensors. And we're seeing more people do that sort of, and that's not a lot of it financially, but also from their ability to consume the tech. Let's just start simple, and then once I get my head around rain and temperature, I'll add a leaf wetness sensor, or I'll add a soil moisture probe. So they, get comfortable with that little bit, and then add a little bit more. And so similar, get comfortable with a protein map. Okay, now I'm comfortable with understanding that map and what drives that. let's go to variability. Instead of doing it all in one hit, they might be able to afford to do it, but that's a hell of an overload of data and information to take on. When they're farmers. They're not computer geeks. They farm because they love farming. They're not in it to be a computer developer. And so having that sort of progression with them, I think, is a big part of it.
And I think it's trying to work out who's supporting you on the journey as well, right? Like you brought up about the agronomist being involved with some of this decision making. They've got the buy-in and they're leading the grower to say, I need this information to make better decisions for you as the grower. And then other times it's the grower's seen something, it's like, I know that's a limiting factor for my business, I want to go down that road. But then you might need to take that agronomist or advisor with you on that journey as well. So how does everyone get access to that data and invested as well to make sure that the decisions have been made on that? Because every time you use data, it's creating value for it. As soon as you've collected data, it's never wasted, but we have to use it to extract the value out of it. There's growers have got access to people out there, whether it's from interpreting weather station soil moisture for better dry land crop management or irrigated crop management, right through to the precision ag side of things. That you can either, if there's someone in the farm business who's willing to devote a bit of time to get upskilled in some of the mapping type softwares, it's not that difficult to make a start and do better than you were when you were doing blanket rate, right? You don't have to get it perfect. Don't let perfection get in the way of progress. And it's trying to take those steps to make sure that you either get the right software package that's going to be suitable for you, and it can be quite simple, right through to then getting a third party to come and actually help you, and they do the full precision ag mapping work for you. So it's trying to work out what's the best fit for you to get to the outcome that you want to do, rather than sort of get that analysis paralysis and we've got all this data but we're doing nothing. And that's where we were on the journey with the protein data, right? Like you see yield data and you think of like yield being like your speedo, like that's the max, like we're trying to push that yield as much as we can. But from the protein side of things, if that's like your fuel tank, like how much fuel we've got to match that speed, if we're not looking at those together and making those decisions there, we're only costing ourselves money, right? And our system's not going to be able to keep up. So making sure we're making the right decisions for the right reasons with the right support then helps a positive outcome at the other end.
Yeah, brilliant.
And I think if you sort of look at a generational farmer, as a individual, you've probably got 40 opportunities to do it, and before you succession or you sell out or you hand over to your son or daughter or however that works. But it's not sort of like a commercial, well, it is a commercial operation, but it's not, you're not building something in the factory that can keep going out. You're making improvements every week. It's once a year. In most cases, it's a single cropping entity. So making those decisions and implementing those changes and following it up, you've only really got 40, maybe 50 opportunities to get it right. Before you throw in weather, before you throw in any other variability, but just your decisions around that choice. So having the data behind it to maximise that choice and that change in farming practices, I think, is critical.
So lots of those data, like the different data points, often sort of sit in their own world, and they sit in their own silo of here's the data for the weather data, here's the protein data. How do we actually link that data to get better value, or are there opportunities there that we should be exploring?
The Agtech world's come a very long way. I guess birth of the internet, everyone had their own platform, their own portal. You know, there are pictures back in the day of tractor cabins that had 5 different screens in them because one did steering, one did spraying, one did fertiliser, one did planting, and none of them talked to each other. You might have put a GPS feed into some of them. Then it sort of moved into sort of being able to do a little bit more in the hardware space, and then in the world of software sort of came out. Everything used to be a CD on the computer, now it's online. But again, it was still very much siloed, and the attitude of companies was, well, no, that's what we do. Well, we could do that if we wanted to, but they were sort of a bit hesitant to sort of share data and share information, and to a degree growers were as well. Growers, a little bit of tinfoil hat, you know, my data, I don't want chemical companies or tractor companies to have my weather station data. That's, that's subsided a little bit. So companies now have APIs, application partner interfaces, where we can share data, and it doesn't have to be everything from that weather station. It could be, well, I want rainfall to go into my John Deere system, or I want the field boundary to go from John Deere to my mapping system. And so that interoperability between companies has improved and has increased a lot. It's still not perfect, there's still a long way to go, but it is getting there. The hardest part is the support behind it. You'll get, I know the weather stations quite well. I'm not great on John Deere, but knowing someone in that John Deere space or in the protein space that you can help, and talking and being willing to go, hey guys, I need a hand here, to talk, to interact, to make it flow between each other, so the grower can have one system, one screen. He's not going from his John Deere screen to his CropScan screen to the Metos weather station screen to satellite imagery and going, hang on, that map sort of looked like that, but I can't bring them up together, I can't overlay them. Oh, it's just too hard.
Yeah.
If it's all in one, it makes life a hell of a lot easier.
Yeah, yeah. What about from CropScan's perspective? Are there opportunities there for integrating, and how does that look, and what benefits can it bring?
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. Like there've been a whole proprietary file sort of challenges with the different coloured machines, and because we're agnostic, we deal with different colours and mixed fleets and all sorts. So we've had to go down that road. So for us, I mean, our sort of step in the link of the chain has been to have our own software that sits there to capture the yield and protein data and hold it there and be able to then talk to each of the platforms to create that flexibility. However, with a lot of the advancements of these platforms, that whole data privacy and the data silos are now getting better interoperability, be able to bring that all together. So as we're seeing these advancements, there's less sort of roadblocks around that. But for us, on different platforms, it is hard to move raw data around. However, a prescription file you can move around because it gets converted more to a shape file, which is a bit more universal in the different screens it can go to. Yeah. Because that is definitely a barrier, right? We can get the raw data, and access to raw data is easy. We can then process that into a pretty map. It's then the farmer's done all the steps, put the right steps in place, and it can fall down with juggling USBs, trying to get it onto the different screens, and finding the file formats are just not aligned. So that's still a step to I guess smooth out a crease that's still there, but it is getting better for sure. Yeah.
But it's also planning, getting growers and industry. The agronomist goes to the farmer in, December, January to sort of say, what fertiliser, what chemical do you need for the growing season? Yep. They need to be going, okay, what do we need to do to your data? It might be after planting, okay, what do we need to do to make variable rate maps for your nitrogen in June or July? Yep. So thinking ahead, it's not like, I want to spread fertiliser today. I've got 5 memory cards and that one's in the cloud, that's on a memory stick, that's still on the machine. It's thinking ahead a little bit to sort of prepare for that, what's coming. Makes life with data a lot easier. Previous careers, GPS steering, it's a lot better these days, but farmers would pull the header out of the shed, put the comb on it, and they'll ring you and go, it's not steering straight. And you'd go, when are you starting harvest? Oh, yesterday. Sat in the shed for 11 months. It could have, 2 weeks ago, got it out and get it ready. But everyone's busy, but it's that little bit of thinking ahead of what you need from the data. We're having a conversation 5 minutes ago about, just finishing a paddock and pausing for 2 minutes to create the zones on your map so it's ready in June or July. You don't have to go back and find it. It's a 2-minute stop, but it's really hard in the middle of harvest when that storm front's coming, but 2 minutes now saves a headache later. It's not always possible, but just sort of trying to sort of be prepared.
Are there tips and tricks there that help with farmers? Are people creating data plans, operation calendars like they do with all their other enterprises? Is it almost another layer that comes over for data and IT management? What practically can they do?
I mean, for us, it's just investing the time in getting a accurate digital farm, right? Make sure, I look at it as harvest is your start of your precision ag season. If we get the yield data right, yield, boundaries, protein if you've got it, get all that data coming together, it means if all the files are named the same, it's not back paddock spelt in the full term and then back PDK and trying to match different naming conventions. If everything can be aligned going into harvest, it makes it super easy to be able to flip that round and turn it into a functional map for that next season. Where if it breaks down at the harvest data, over that Christmas break, everyone wants to be on a holiday, and then you come back and you have to sort data files, the novelty wears off really quick. So being able to just get that right going into harvest, like Jim said, start working on that now before the heat of harvest gets going. Get the digital farm right, you grow a farm field, get the basics right so the data's landing in the right spot, and then it all comes together really easy. As soon as that's not right, it's a proper friction point.
Yeah.
I think it's that adoption curve. The adoption curve of Agtech, you'd sort of say, is middle tail end now, but the adoption curve of data management, it's still the leading edge.
Yeah.
There are farmers out there that, you sit there and you go, oh my God, this guy's phenomenal. They're the small percentage still. They're getting better, the software's getting better, it's getting easier, it's getting smoother, cheat sheets are getting better.
Yeah.
YouTube's a wonderful device.
Yeah.
The question you think of, type it into the internet, and I'm sure there's a video or a story somewhere of someone doing it.
Yeah.
But again, it's that time, it's sitting down to do it. It's not bouncing down the track with a bag of fertiliser going, how am I going to make a VR map?
Yeah.
Take half an hour and do it before you screaming and wanting it done.
Yeah. Brilliant. Guys, I think we've wandered through understanding the devices, we understand the decisions, some discussion on the data side of things. Any closing comments or things you want to cover off before we wrap up?
I think the Agtech and the data and the software that is out there and available can make life easier. Everyone talks about return on investment. Yes, there can be a return on investment, but that return doesn't have to be financial. It might be, you still might use 1,000 tonnes of nitrogen, but you're putting it where the paddocks need it more. So you then can get better crops, more even crops, more consistent crops, so you don't block the header coming across a big death cookie. Or with the irrigation side of things and the weather stations, do I need to irrigate? Is it irrigating? Am I getting moisture there? A device that says yes you are, the pump's on, it's working, it's flowing, you've got the right pressure. You don't have to drive down and check it. You can take the kids to school. That's a return on investment. Yeah. It's not always financial. It can be time.
Yeah.
And it needs to be a balance of pulling your hair out with Agtech and it working. The industry's out there. There are the experts out there. There are people who know how to do things, how to make things connect. Taking that time to find them, get it to work properly before you're pulling your hair out makes life a lot easier.
Fair enough.
Yeah, for me, I think it's probably even just taking a step back and do a stock take of what tech you've already got on your farm and think, are you using it to its full potential? And if not, what might help you get more value out of that? And we see that again, like with the moisture probes. So for me, more soils focused, but you're like, right, we can understand the size of our bucket with a moisture probe. Most people, when they have a weather station, they'll check it when it rains. And that's the main sort of port of call for checking a weather station, as opposed to understanding how does that decision making help support my business decisions through the season. And then it's a point in time, right? So quite often it'll be on an average soil type or your best soil type where the probe is. So it's like, okay, what does that mean for extrapolating that data out? And then going on that journey of saying, what would be the one thing I couldn't live on my farm without? And quite often, from an ag tech perspective, when you ask that to a grower, they default to be auto steer, right? I can't survive without that. That'd be the one thing. You could take everything else away, I couldn't survive without that. However, that's just putting straight lines in paddocks. However, that's a really important step for saying, now you've got that down to that 2 centimetre accuracy, what can we now be doing better? And that's what I think the missing sort of step change now is the proper adoption of some of the variable rate technology to be able to make that next step change and improvement, because we've got everything perfectly mapped out now that we just need to start enacting improved decision making that you've got confidence in, right?
Yep.
And linking the different data tools there from moisture, rainfall, the future forecasts, link it back to your inputs is really going to close that loop and see those next step changes come through.
Yeah, brilliant. Ed, Jim, thanks very much. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Hamish.
Thank you.
Thank you.